Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 21st of April 2022, and these are the stories that will be under discussion during the course of the show. We'll begin with a detailed outlook of Pakistan's economy under the whole IMF program, which Pakistan is trying to acquire. Now, Miftah Ismail, who is the Federal Minister for Finance and Revenue, he has tweeted that he's off to Washington, D.C. to put back on track the Pakistani IMF program that the previous government, in his point of view, had derailed, endangering our economy. Now, the IMF also has put 5 major conditionalities as far as a revival of this $6 billion bailout package is concerned. We'll be discussing that in detail. Also, the heads of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have warned on Wednesday that rising interest rates are squeezing the world's poorest nations as they struggle with the COVID-19 and the soaring food prices. Also, China's actions to support the economy are going to be vital to global recovery, says the head of the IMF, and she warns that a prolonged slowdown would have substantial spillover effects. This is going to be our first segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the situation as far as Israel is concerned. Israel has carried out again air raids in the central Gaza Strip for the second time this week. The military jets attacked an underground complex that was used to produce rocket engines, and of course the raids ended before dawn on Thursday. This is nothing new, but this is not stopping. Since what happened last year in May, this is a continuous spate of incidents that has been happening, perpetrated by the Israeli regime. Then we'll be talking about a roadside bomb that has at least wounded 2 children on Thursday in the Afghan capital of Kabul. The explosives went on in the middle of a road in the western area of Kabul. And of course, this was an area that belonged to the Hazaras, the Shiite neighborhood. Now, this is also a continuation of what the IS has claimed in the past, that it was behind targeting the Hazara Shias. And this is a very unfortunate spate of incidents that is occurring in Afghanistan. And finally, we'll be talking about women who should make up 40% of the boards at the British listed companies, and one director needs to be a person of color, meaning Asian or African American or African descent. This was said by the country's financial watchdog on Wednesday, and it has set a range of diversity targets for firms' top leaders. A very good development as far as the West is concerned, especially the United Kingdom. Now, let's start with our first story, our first segment, and that concerns the economic state in which Pakistan especially is present, and also the world. Whether it be due to COVID-19, whether it be due to the Ukraine situation or the Afghan situation or other situations, the economy, especially of developing nations, is at risk. And that is why there was a major $6 billion bailout package that was that had been offered by the IMF, but that was paused, and now Miftah Ismail, our Minister for Finance and Revenue, is off to Washington to again discuss the conditionalities of this bailout package. But the IMF has set out 5 major conditions for the revival of this package. That and more in detail, but after this short report.
International energy prices, pandemic-induced recession, geopolitical developments, and elevated global food prices from supply disruptions is increasing inflationary pressure worldwide with trickle-down effect on Pakistan. Signaling urgency of prudent economic solution, the heads of International Monetary Fund and World Bank warned that rising interest rates are squeezing the world's poorest countries as they struggle with pandemic shock and soaring food prices. Amid deteriorating outlook of global economy, IMF Managing Director cautioned that China's action to support the economy will be vital to the global recovery, warning that a prolonged slowdown would have substantial spillover effects. In order to navigate turbulent economic waters, Finance Minister Miftah Ismail left for Washington to meet IMF officials for the resumption of the delayed $6 billion loan program. It is pertinent to mention here that IMF tranche had earlier been subject to delays given the political uncertainty within the country. According to Finance Minister Miftah Ismail, IMF has set out 5 major conditions for the revival of $6 billion bailout package, including reversal of fuel subsidies, increase in electricity tariffs, imposition of new taxes, ensuring fiscal savings, and withdrawal of the tax amnesty scheme. 3 program reviews are pending, and their completion will pave the way for release of a total $3 billion, remaining 3 tranches before the program is completed in September.
Dr. Zubair Khan, leading economist, joins us online. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, Miftah Ismail Saab is on his way to Washington to discuss this US 6 billion bailout package that was offered by the IMF and then stalled. The conditionalities that have been put forward, let's begin with those. The 5 major conditionalities: reversal of fuel subsidies, withdrawal of the tax amnesty scheme, increase in electricity tariffs, imposition of new taxes, and ensuring fiscal savings that are aimed at bringing down the projected primary budget deficit of rupees 1.3 trillion to the earlier agreed limit of rupees 25 billion surplus. How much of these 5 conditionalities that have been put forward by the IMF can be achievable by Pakistan in the next few months?
Look, let's be a little accurate on this. These are not new conditionalities. These are the conditions under which the IMF program has been operating so far. And there may have been slippages in these 5 areas during the last few months of political turmoil, when any political government would be making concessions to the public in order to solidify its position in the political turmoil that was happening.
Dr. Saab, I mean, therein lies a dichotomy. On the one hand are the strict conditionalities put by the IMF, not since now, since before, as you've very well explained. On the other hand is the relief of the common man. If you apply these conditionalities in letter and spirit, then you put the common man's life at a high economic risk. How can a government like Pakistan's balance this out?
Well, I was on another channel last night, and this is exactly what I argued, that since the steps that are needed to save the Pakistan economy have high political costs, this is not the right time for a government that is about to go into elections to negotiate with the IMF. I had suggested that we must hold elections immediately and let the elections be over with, so that whichever party wins the election comes to the table with the IMF with a strong mandate, and then be able to take any tough and painful decisions which are required to set the economy back on track. So this is no doubt a very difficult time for the present government to be negotiating these things. And it is not the fault of anyone, but the global market conditions are such that require that prices be adjusted. Pakistan does not have the luxury of not passing on the cost, because let's face it, from where will we create the space in the budget? Is the government ready to create space through other expenditure cuts? Maybe not. They're talking of higher taxes. That is not the objective of the IMF program. I've been at the IMF for 12 years. The objective of the IMF is to increase the primary balance surplus, or reduce the deficit in that primary balance. And that can be achieved through expenditure cuts. Pakistan's expenditures today in the budget, consolidated budget, are 23% of GDP. 1/5 of the economy is with the government. They need to cut back at least 15% of that. They'll create a surplus of 4%.
Is that achievable? Cutting 15%, knowing exactly the expenditures that the Pakistan's government has to incur. Do you feel this is something that can be done?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the extravagance in our government is amazing. There is an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 cars in the government pool. Look at that. I mean, look at the British government. How many cars do they have in the government pool? Look at the air conditioning. Look at the salary increases all the time. These salary increases are not related to productivity. Now, look, and the poor of Pakistan are not working for the government of Pakistan. These are relatively better off. Yes, they should get some salary increase, but not right now. We need to restrain ourselves. We need to think of the rest of the 215 million people who are not working in the government. That how will they deal with the effects of all of these increases in expenditures? And let me tell you, the inflation is driven mostly by the increase in money supply, which is in turn driven by the government credit given to the public sector, which is required because running huge deficits. Now, if we were to reduce the deficit, we control inflation, we reduce the pressure on the current account deficit, we stabilize the exchange rate, we stabilize the reserves. The answers are very obvious. But as I said in the beginning, these are difficult steps to take for a government that is about to go into elections. I'm sure the present government would like to go into elections with popular steps, which may have medium to long term terrible effects on the economy. But they would like to do that. Pakistan needs steps which are in the interest of the country, not in this any I think government, whether it was the previous government or this government, is would have taken popular steps, steps which would have seemed in favor of the people, but not
But
exact.
Dr. Saab, to be very frank, the IMF conditionalities are such that you cannot go with favorable steps that go in line with the people's expectations, as has been enshrined in the previous government's manifesto, and I'm sure in other government political parties' manifesto as well. When you look at the inflation rate that is averaging at 11% in the current fiscal year as per the ADB report, when you look at the budget deficit as you've talked about, and it is appearing on the lower side, they say, due to rationalizing less essential current spending, expanding tax and non-tax revenue. Do you feel really that popular steps could be taken, whether it be right now by this transitioning government or the government that will come after the elections, whenever these elections are held in the next few months? Do you feel the difficult steps will be taken by any government that comes into power and that will not be favorable with the people?
Look, but we have to take them in a way that we protect the poor classes. We must protect the social sector programs that are in place since the last two, three regimes, which have been built up by each government that has come to place. Those have to be protected. But there are many, many expenditures. I see, like, for instance, I keep giving this example. I see government cars going to restaurants. I see them going to clubs. I see them going to resorts. I mean, just look at what is happening in this country. Does Pakistan government look like a government that is about to go bankrupt, that is going begging from capital to capital for more money? That is not. Look, I think that really the IMF conditions are to bring responsibility to government
When you
expenditures.
talk of bringing responsibility, Dr. Zubair, a very interesting point comes to mind, and that is increasing the tax base, basically increasing the number of people that pay their regular taxes. And if we, and you know, and I know, and a lot of other people know as well, as to who really pays their taxes and who doesn't pay their taxes, how can the government achieve a maximum tax base in your point of view, including all those elite who are not paying their taxes properly?
Listen, we look at the capital market, look at the stock market. It's not even taxed properly. Look at the capital gains which are not being taxed over there. I mean, we don't have to go far. Look, the distribution of income in Pakistan is highly skewed. If you just try and capture all the rich people who are not paying taxes or not paying enough taxes, I think you would have covered everything. They are always going after the poor man who's barely making more than the minimum threshold level, and they are trying to capture them. That is not where the taxes are being evaded. The taxes are being evaded at the highest level, at the most, at the upper income levels. So I think it can be addressed. We need to increase that. But let me look at the expenditure side. People keep saying that, look, the tax GDP ratio is only 11, 12, 13%. I say, look at the expenditure side. We are fluctuating between 22 and 23 and a half, 24% of GDP. How can a country as poor as Pakistan afford these expenditures? And I'm sure finding 15% cuts is nothing. Tell every department, cut the expenditures. Shehbaz Sharif is known to be a doer. Now, this is the time for him to prove if he's going to go into the elections. Cut expenditures. That's going to be very popular with the people of Pakistan. But will he do it? Is he ready to do it? That is why I'm saying, let us go into elections first, resolve that issue, for the timing, stay with the IMF program the way it is. It is not the best program. I've always argued for a homegrown program, but which is responsible. This is not in that sense. They come up with the prescriptions they can see best, but Pakistan has never
But
been
speaking
able
of
to.
prescriptions, Dr. Zubair, one of the prescriptions of the five important topics that it has has been putting forward is a reversal of fuel subsidies. Now, this is something that has been debated many a times in the past as well. Can this happen really? If you reverse really the fuel subsidies, the fuel rates will really go high, and that will affect the life of the common man, including the marginalized community. How to go about it?
Look, I tell you one thing. You have to deal with reality. Fuel prices are going up globally. What can Pakistan do? Pakistan should remove all taxes on fuel, which I understand have been more or less removed. But then we can also protect the one fuel which affects the lives of the poor man. They all use transport and freight, diesel. They all are in agriculture, with the tractors and the water pumps, they use diesel. Industry, the labor is working there, they use diesel. Protect diesel and let the taxes be passed on to cars. If you noticed, every car has just one occupant when they come to work. That doesn't happen in the West. People carpool. There are many other reasons why carpooling should be done. If four people were to sit in one car, you reduce the fuel consumption by 75%. So let us be fair. Pakistan is living way beyond its means. Pakistan is living on a gravy train. We are coming to the end of the road very soon. I mean, it's not
Dr. Saab,
because one
speaking of
party.
fuel, I'd like to have your point of view on one thing. Do you feel fuel rationing is something that is possible? We've seen that many years before in Pakistan as well. Do you feel this can be done?
No. Fuel rationing. Look, these are methods and techniques that were used in the communist era, century planned places. It never works. It creates black markets. It creates more distortions. It creates problems. Price mechanism is the only way that you deal. You can't say that so and so will get cheap price and fuel and so will not. The types of fuel can make a difference because the types of fuel are clearly used in different sectors of the economy. I think we should protect the productive side of the economy more than the one that is using it for just moving around. You will find more buses will become popular. There are all these bus services, expensive. $450 million was spent on the red bus system in Rawalpindi, Islamabad. 5 or 10 buses running a day. Yeah, look at that extravagance that has been wasted. Now, if you make petrol prices higher, maybe more people will use the buses. There'll be more buses on these routes. Then we'll utilize that huge investment that was done a few years ago. So I'm suggesting that the people of Pakistan, we need to protect the poor because they have already been squeezed through inflation, through lower incomes,
True,
through
true,
the
true.
unemployment, of course, has come down, but still they are at the level of subsistence. We must protect them. But the upper
Another
sector.
thing that is going to affect them and would affect them if it is applied is the increase in electricity tariffs. We've already seen that increase in electricity tariffs, not to the extent that the IMF has wished, but if it does happen, if this government or the government that comes after the elections in a couple of months imposes the new electricity rates as per the IMF requirements, what happens then to the common man?
Look, on the electricity, my response is different than on fuel prices. On fuel, we have to pass on the world cost. In the electricity sector, if you look at even NEPRA documents, everything, the line wastages, the wastages are near 22%, and they continue over there. That's because of bad governance. And because there are so many wastages, there are so many, shall we say, technical and other responsibilities. There, the government should have worked on it, bring it down to the global norm of 6-7%. So you can imagine that the inefficiencies of the power sector are being borne by the consumers, by you and me and everyone else. Now, if those were reduced, the IMF would not be insisting to raise the prices. They want to balance the budget within the energy sector. Now, if the government says the only way we can balance it is by raising prices, that's the problem of the government. That's the fault of the government, not the IMF. The IMF is telling us to be prudent. Please cover your costs, and if your cover cost, if your cost cover include 20% wastage, then it was the job of the government. They never tell the public that are not doing our job. We've got 20% wastage, and we are passing on that the cost of that to you in your bills. Can you imagine all your electricity tariff rates will go down by 20%? By the time the fuel adjustment charges come, we would be still below the rates where we are. Industry would get more competitive. The whole country would flourish. Look, Pakistan's problems are so clear and well defined. If they were to be handled, like you say, you take the bull by the horn. If they were to be
But
taken
Dr.
on,
Zubair, that's a very interesting approach that you've said, that the Pakistan's economic woes are clear and defined, and Pakistan's government, any government, should take the bulls by the horns. Why hasn't that been done in the past then? If we understand what the exact issues with Pakistan's economy are, why haven't they been addressed properly?
No, I mean, number one, there is a matter of competence. There is a lack of will to do it because there are vested interests. There are vested interests. There are many vested interests in the departments, especially in the power sector. You know that some of the higher power rates are because of the IPP agreements that we had made. We have got stuck with bad agreements, and now we cannot get out of them. If we renege on them, we will be taken to the international arbitration courts. Now the point is, we should have negotiated something better. There was a time to do it better, but when the government decided to review these agreements, the people in charge of the reviews were IPP owners. So there's always been vested interest. Look at what's happening in the sugar industry. I mean, you've got the sugar, all the political parties are literally run by the sugar mafia. Now, how can you bring efficiency to the sugar industry? Now, Pakistan produces sugar above the global market at most of the time. The consumer should be able to buy sugar from the global markets. But no, we are protecting this industry. And the sugar industry is making so much money that Pakistan has given up producing cotton that we needed, and we start producing sugarcane. Pakistan doesn't have the competitive advantage to grow sugarcane, but we are growing. Cotton production has gone down.
And of course, sugarcane implies a lot of usage of water, and we can't afford to have so much of water used by one single industry, and that is the sugarcane industry.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
But do you see that who are the biggest sugar mill owners? The owners of People's Party, the owners of PMLN. There were some in PTI also. So there are vested interests in all of these parties. I'm saying that, look, the political parties need to rise above their personal interests, above their political interests. Going into elections, they say the popular things, they give the wrong promises to the people, then the people want those. We need to act and make policies in the interest of Pakistan.
And we need to be more pragmatic in our approach, especially when it comes to Pakistan's economy. What do you feel about that, sir?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Do we also need to be more pragmatic as far as our economy and future of economy is concerned?
No, absolutely. But first we must see that, listen, I mean, in this economy, is there any space left for, shall we say, continuing to do with inefficiencies, with extravagance? We do not have the space. Pakistan, unfortunately, has look at the debt GDP ratio is now near 90%. There's a law, the debt limitation and fiscal responsibility and debt limitation law, which says the debt GDP ratio cannot be above 60%. Otherwise, the government is breaking the law, and all the governments have been breaking the law. I have personally filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and it has been accepted that the government should be compelled to act within the law. But nothing is happening. Now, you see, this is the problem. The governments are not ready to restrain their expenditures, their policies to what is in the interest, in the long-term and medium-term interest of Pakistan. If the economy were flourishing, everyone would be better off. The political parties, the people of Pakistan. So it's the economy that has to be addressed. And we are seeing a lot of squabbling and all of that going on, but very little discussion of different policies.
I agree with you. Dr. Saab, to take off pressure from the external sector, the government is trying to get in touch with friendly countries like Qatar, like China. There is talk of financial assistance from China. There's talk of secured LNG on deferred payment from Qatar. Would this help Pakistan?
Look, I tell you, I think my sort of suggestion to even the PTI government when they first came, I said, listen, unless you first deal with the hemorrhage that we have in our foreign exchange reserves, don't borrow more dollars, otherwise it will just slip out like it did before your government. Now, again, I would tell our friendly countries, and this is what I've been suggesting to China also, that if you're true friends of Pakistan, you must roll over the debt, give us your money again, but please suggest to Pakistan to fix the ills that are creating the shortage of foreign exchange in the reserves. And I think that this time they are probably doing that. That is why the rollover has taken a little time this time. We will call it conditionality. People will make all of these popular sort of slogans that we are being put. No, they will tell you to please fix the holes in this tank before you put more fuel in it. Now, this is the whole point. Pakistan must. We have been borrowing billions of dollars in the last 10-15 years. According to my estimate, $28 billion were borrowed to protect the wrong exchange rate, to finance the current account deficit, which is driven by the large fiscal deficit. We are simply borrowing again and again to rectify, to avert the crisis which must happen because of our wrong policies. It's time to fix the wrong policies first and then get money to help Pakistan grow.
All
Otherwise,
right.
you will waste
Finally, Dr. Zubair, I'd like to understand what the finance minister said that the immediate challenge as far as Pakistan's economy was. He said to sustain the foreign exchange reserves at the current levels and arrange $4 billion US more to pay for the current account deficit. He has also said that the exchange market was very thin and there was a need to remain vigilant about any attempts to manipulate the rupee value. I would like to have your take on these 4 points.
Look, on the second point, yes, this is correct. The exchange rate market is very thin. The recent rise of the dollar vis-a-vis rupee up to 188, I think was driven by speculation and so forth. But it is also a fact that the exchange rate is under pressure because the current account is in deficit. And the current account is in deficit by the tautology. It's very simple macroeconomics. Whenever the domestic demand exceeds domestic supply, we call it there is excess demand. And that excess demand sort of goes over to the current account deficit and causes inflation. So you really have to reduce the domestic demand, and the biggest player there is the budget deficit. You reduce that, you create less money because money creation comes from the credit to the public sector. So you reduce the growth in M2. M2 is growing at 15% when real growth is 4%. So you can imagine there's 10-11% of liquidity to fuel the inflation at 10-11%. It is straight away quantity theory of money. So we really need to do something over there. If they want to address the external sector, they are actually, the external sector is the outcome of policies at home. So there is no external policy as such. That is the outcome. So you have to address the domestic imbalances. And for that, they must reduce the budget deficit. That is why I said Miftah's main job should be that. But does he have the clout that in his party he will be able to suggest to them that, look, bring the deficit down by 3-4%? My estimate is, to bring it down by 3-4%, you have to cut all expenditures in all departments, including defense, judiciary, everywhere, 15%. It's not difficult. Leave it to them. Every department should tell the federal government where they can bring the savings. Whether they lay off excess people, whether they reduce the cars, whether they use less air conditioners, whether they do less current expense, whatever they do. They should bring it down by 15%. You improve the budget deficit, will come down from 8-9% to 3-4%. And
All right.
instantly you will see the impact on the current account, on the exchange rate. Everything will start improving. Our debt will go down. This will be what I would call the magic step that will do that.
All right.
But
Now, I'd like a very, very quick answer, one or two phrase answers, because we're a bit short of time as far as your segment is concerned. The first is the warning by the IMF and the World Bank of the huge buildup of debt in the poorest of nations. Now, I'm also including Pakistan and also the other nations as well. And they say that the rising interest rates are squeezing the world's poorest nations because of COVID, because of other issues, and the geopolitical, geostrategic situation. What should be done? How should the world move forward so as to not further have this build-up of debt by different nations, including Pakistan?
Yeah, the IMF chief has said it now. But listen, I have been saying this for the last 3, 4 years. I have a petition in the Supreme Court sitting on this issue. The high interest rates in Pakistan are they have aggravated our debt problem. They have put us in a debt trap. It is common knowledge in economics that to reduce debt, you have to reduce interest rates. When there were interest rate liberalization, globally interest rate rose. But after 2008, when the global markets were they went into debt because of that crisis, interest rates globally fell to 1-2%. But in Pakistan, we had a governor who took the rates up to 13%.
All right. Last question, Dr. Saab, is the IMF chief that warns of global risks from a prolonged China slowdown. She says, Ma'am Georgieva, that Beijing has room to take measures to support the world's second biggest economy. How important is China's role as far as global economy is concerned? Your take, very quick and short answer.
China's role at the global economy is huge. But for Pakistan, I think that our markets are more in Europe and United States. Yes, with China we have trading relations, but our exports are not very large over there. I don't think that China's slowdown is going to impact Pakistan much. Pakistan and China have relations which go beyond the global trading system. And I think that their investment in Pakistan will depend on the stability, political stability over here and the economic stability. If we can keep our own economy stable and the political situation within the constitutional limits, I think that Chinese sort of, shall we say, positive input into Pakistan will remain there, and we should not worry about that too much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Zubair Khan, leading economist from Pakistan, talking about Pakistan's economic situation. Also, the Federal Minister for Finance and Revenue, Miftah Ismail, who's on his way to Washington to renegotiate the $6 billion US dollar deal that IMF had done with the government way back in 2019. And of course, we also talked about the global economy and how different issues such as COVID-19, such as the geostrategic, geoeconomic situation, have impacted the economy and the debt crisis in the poor nations, in the developing nations. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Israel and Palestine. Nothing new there, but of course, the atrocities continue unabated as far as Israel is concerned. Now, Israel recently has carried out air raids in the central Gaza Strip for the second time this week, and its military says the fighter jets attacked an underground complex that was used to produce rocket engines. This raid came before dawn on Thursday. Although there were no immediate reports of casualties, but witnesses have said that attacks damaged several homes in the Al Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza. No Palestinian faction, of course, has claimed responsibility for the rocket launches, but Hamas, in a statement, has said that the group that administers Gaza said Israel's bombing will only encourage Palestinians to resist the occupation and step up the support for Jerusalem and its people. Dr. Manzoor Afridi joins us online. He's an international relations expert. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, nothing new, nothing out of way as far as what is happening in Israel, but of course the intensity of the atrocities is increasing. What is the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim of Israel?
Well, it is very much clear that Israel wants to have further expansion in all of the Palestinian land. If we see, so when it was illegitimately created in 1948, after that times, then in 1967 when there was Arab-Israel war, and after that 1973 the another Ramadan war occurred over there, and since then, there was the occupation of more and more Palestinian lands. So I am speechless at this moment to look into the character and the role of the international community, that half they are silent about it, about the international organizations in the United Nations. Only the Secretary General of United Nations called for us to to calm down, and he called both the Israeli and the Palestinian authorities to have a peaceful solution. But in this regard, if we see that the violence that is continued from the Israeli side, and the Palestinians, they are killed. Only last month in March, if we see, there are dozens of Palestinians killed by the Israeli violence, and many of them, they were arrested. So in this case, if we see the Palestinians, they are unarmed, so they are helpless people. I think that is only the double standard of international community, which is not focusing on this issue seriously, and it is one of the oldest conflicts on the table of the United Nations Security Council. I think no conflict has been so far for a long time on the table of the United Nations, and no conflict has been discussed more than this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think, if I'm not wrong, that the casualties what have done in this conflict since 1947 and 48, I think we have no example in recent history. So the international community, the great powers, the major powers, they have to realize about the intensity. And if you ask that what will be the conclusion or what will be the end of this conflict, that is very much clear that all the Palestinians, those will be homeless, and there will be cleansing, that is the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And it is very much unfortunate that in this 21st century, where the West is calling for the human rights and what they are having, to have safeguard for the rights of the people. So it is a slap on the face of the international organizations like the United Nations and all the great powers. So that's only the expansion, the illegitimate construction of the homes and the bulldozing of the homes of the Palestinian people. So it is very much ruthless.
All right. Dr. Manzoor Afridi, do you also see a rise in ultra-nationalism? And don't you see a comparison between what is happening in Israel and what is happening in India, whether it be the Jewish ultra-nationalists that are increasing their protests, or when you compare that with the BJP saffrons wielding ultra-nationalists that are also wielding their arms in India? And do you feel both are related in one way or the other? Do you feel that ultra-nationalism is also one of the causes of issues between nations or in nations such as Israel and in India?
Exactly. I think not two opinions, and it is absolutely right that if you see, if you do the comparison between the Palestinian conflict and the Kashmir conflict, both of them, they are of the same age. Both of them, they start in 1947. And second, about the human rights violation record. So that is, I think everybody is aware about these two conflicts, that have the Israelis and the Indian governments, they have persecuted people, and they have violated the human rights. And third, if we see, yes, the ultra-nationalist trend, the Hindutva over there, the Hindutva doctrine in the Indian state, and after that, the 335 and 370 articles of the Indian constitution have unilaterally and illegally that became part of the Indian territory. And on the other side, the Palestinian conflict, no doubt that even in this conflict, and even yesterday, the Israeli politician, he also urged for more and more action to be taken against the Palestinians. So he belonged to the right wing, the ultra-nationalist
Itamar Ben Gvir. The name is Itmar.
Yes.
Mr. Gavir. He is a controversial opposition politician, and of course he says that he asks even the Israeli Prime Minister to go home. In fact, they are so ultra-conventional in their whole philosophy of having the whole area to themselves and not giving the land to the Palestinians. When you look at the incursions as far as Israel is concerned, on Tuesday, before even this one, Israel carried out its first strike on Gaza in months. Then at that time, Antonio Guterres had said that he was deeply concerned by this situation in Jerusalem. In March, Israeli forces had killed 29 Palestinians in raids on West Bank. Then in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound raid that happened last week, wounding at least 158 Muslim worshippers. The tensions are really on an all-time high. Do you really feel that the West, the UN, the US can play some kind of a role, or will they?
They can play a role, no doubt. But another question, that will they? I don't think so, because they have interests over there. They have bilateral interests with the Israel. So and they don't want to to lose the interests in the Middle East and so many other countries. So I don't think so that they will play their role. What the need is, of course, the Muslim countries, they have to come forward, and the representative organization of the Muslim countries, that is the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, although that it is not in a very much functional position. But if we see the role of the United Nations or the major powers, or what you asked about the US or UK or some others, so we have seen and we have repeatedly experienced it. So it is that they are doing nothing, and I think they are useless in this conflict, in this Palestinian conflict. What we have to do, only the Muslim countries, that they should be united, and there should be boycott of the Israel or any kind of tough time what they can do and they can give for Israel. And on the other side, the allies, the supporters, the partners, the friends of Israel throughout the world where they are. So the economic relationship, the Muslim countries, what they have with them, so then the economic coercion can be used in this regard, so to persuade, to convince them, and for having tough action against the Israel. I think that's the only way. Tit for tat should be there, and what we wait for the diplomatic solution or peaceful solution. There were so many treaties and accords, the Camp David Accord, and so many others on in the Egypt and the Israel, with the assistance of America, the Bill Clinton era, the Jimmy Carter era. We have all of them we have experienced, but that is I think the double standard role and the game played by the United States, which it doesn't really want to have solution for this conflict. And I think why it will want that there is very much strong Jewish lobby in United States, and in their politics, in their media, in their businesses. The Jews, they are very much powerful, and of course they are being the messages in the links what they have with the Jerusalem or with the Tel Aviv, with Israel. So they are very much strong. So in this regard, we have not to be to expect a very fruitful result from the West and the America. Only the Muslim countries they can do, and I wish and hope to do in future.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Manzoor Afridi, international relations expert, who have talked to us about the Palestinian issue. And of course, is an issue that remains since 1948 and aggravated in 1967, whether it be since then the Al-Aqsa Mosque issue, which is the third holiest site in Islam, or the fact that the Palestinians who want occupied East Jerusalem, including its Muslim, Christian and Jewish holy sites, as the capital for a future state. Much needs to be discussed, much needs to be discussed in a manner that comes to a logical and tangible solution. But will that happen? Only time will tell. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay tuned, stay safe, and have a blessed fast. Allah Hafiz.